Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Kristi Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC. See, this is a fun way to say this today.
Good morning.
Got
Welcome to our podcast because we are Kristi squared today.
Kristi with an I and Kristi with an IE.
That's right. We are excited to have Kristi Perryman on here with us. And if you can hear my dog barking, I apologize. But Kristi is joining us from Arkansas, and she is a professor there, as well as on the board for APT right now. Some fun things about Kristi Perryman. She started her career as a teacher and then moved into counseling, specifically school counseling, and then became a counselor educator, where she's been a counselor educator for over 20 years now, and has done some amazing research, in particular in schools, but also been play therapist in a school setting from a school counseling lens, as well as a clinical mental health. So we are super excited to have her on our podcast today. Welcome, Dr. Perryman.
Yay!
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And I know I missed a whole bunch of things. What did I miss that I didn't get to share about?
Please, you covered plenty.
He's the director and founder of the Office of Play Therapy Research and Training.
Yes, at the University of Arkansas.
How many articles you have?
Oh,
she started that program at Arkansas, which is exciting, and has really made an impact in Arkansas. Is doing some great work in Arkansas, helping to change kind of trends in Arkansas around child well-being and child mental health. And so we are happy to have her here today.
Very excited.
And I'm excited because I will be a new colleague to Dr. Perryman starting in the fall.
Yay!
Yes.
95% excited and 5% jealous. Like y'all are gonna have so much fun. And also I looked and it's 69 peer-reviewed articles on Google Scholar. So we've done a lot of work. So I'm kind of curious, Kristi, first off, thank you for coming. And as we know each other, but we don't get to spend a lot of time getting to know each other's background. So what prompted you? You were a special education teacher, and then you went into school counseling. And then how did you get to play from all of those backgrounds? How did that occur?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here. Thank you both. I think very highly of both of you, as you know. Love your podcast. Tell everyone that I know who's interested in play or should be interested in play that they need to be listening to it. So I started out as a special ed teacher in elementary in a rural school. And I just found that I was spending a lot more time working on things that were going on with them at home, trying to help them, with those things, which ended up helping them with their academics. Obviously, I did my role, I completed my role as a teacher too, but I just found that I was more interested in helping them with all of those things going on in their lives that seemed to be really impeding them and their school success. So then I became a school counselor, and I was an elementary counselor in rural schools for 4 years, I believe. And then also worked in inner city two at-risk schools, junior high schools, and also in urban elementary schools. So the way I found out about play was when I decided to go back and get my master's in counseling. School counselors were required to take play therapy coursework. And Dr. Shirley Hendricks was my professor. She was one of Gary Landreth's first students in 1969. I believe she was his first GA, actually. And she moved. So she had been a teacher, moved to Texas, got in the program. And at that time in Denton, a single woman, no one would rent to a single woman. And so her story about how she finally found a place to live, which was actually this outbuilding. She actually bought a guy a case of beer to paint it for her. And anyway, the story of how she made this work amazes me, because I call her, I tell my students, she's your play therapy grandmother. I wouldn't be here, so you wouldn't be here. without her. So, as a school counselor, I was required to take the play classes and fell in love with it. We had a clinic on our campus, and I just felt I'd finally found my niche. That was where I was the happiest, was in the playroom. And so, as a school counselor, I always had playrooms in the schools, and I thought everyone did. I didn't know that everyone didn't. When I started at my schools, they I was the first full-time elementary counselor at both of the schools that I started out at. They didn't have any playrooms. Even when I went to get my doc degree, I remember saying when I would go interview, well, where are the playrooms? Oh, we don't have those. Well, what about your play therapy coursework? We don't have that. I was so privileged. I had no idea. So that's how I came across play and decided that's what I wanted to do.
That's awesome. That's really cool that they required you to take it, because that's not, we were just kind of offline talking about how we don't often prepare people for working with student or with children or students. And so the fact that they recognize that and the importance of doing that
Yes.
is really cool. And I think there's also with school-based play therapists, we don't often talk about that and what that looks, because it is different. Because as a school counselor, you're also having to wear so many different hats and do so many different things that I have students a lot of times. I'm not sure if you experience the same thing, Kristi, but where they're, well, I can't be child-centered, or I can't do this because I also have to do guidance, or I also have to be in the hall. And I'm like, well, you can reflect feelings in the hall. You don't have
Yeah.
to.
My supervisor says I have to be solution focused because I'm a school counselor.
I get that a lot too. Hmm.
That's not where your theoretical perspective comes from, actually.
Right.
So,
Who knew?
yeah.
Well,
So
and I think it fails to show that kids can see us differently in different spaces. Your job may require you to do different things. So, in the sense of, doing guidance lessons, you can still hold a more student learning centric approach, which is the teaching version of person centered or child centered in the playroom, right? Within your guidance lessons in the classroom.
And I would hope that you naturally do,
You,
because to me that
right?
doesn't
'Cause,
congruent.
yeah.
Lunch duty in the playroom, those feel incongruent for me. That was not that was not my best. I found that I would volunteer to do a lot of duties to not do lunch duty.
yeah, lunch duty is a lot. It's a lot.
I was also going to say, you call it privilege of having this background, Kristi, but I also think it's that um, mm, the word that keeps coming up in my mind is naive perspective of going into that job, right? And that you were able to create some really amazing things without this heavy expectation on top of you. And sometimes I wonder if students hear so much today of what they have to be and what they have to do. And I so just want them to go in there and
Yes, yes,
be good at being them instead of trying to fit into these already previous cubby holes. And that when we
right.
go in with this kind of deep respect and value for the training that they have, that they can
Mhm.
create these spaces. And it may be different than what other people expect, but they can also do wonderful things as a child-centered school counselor.
Yes. And I think, the fact that I had been a teacher for quite a while, made me more confident. A lot of my students, have come straight through and from their bachelor's to their master's and sometimes even to their PhD and haven't really worked out in the community much. So I know that makes a difference, but I always just went into my schools. There was a naivety about, well, yeah, everybody, we do play therapy, but also with the idea that I know what I'm doing. I'm confident in this. And I think that is my personality. I tend to go in and just assume that I can do something until something comes up that makes me think otherwise. Um, and there wasn't any pushback, but I think my confidence in it and also I did a lot of work to, I always did in services with my teachers and I did an in service with them for two reasons. One, to explain what we then called model guidance. It's not called that anymore, but ask a model so that they would know what it is I'm supposed to be doing because they'd never had full-time school counselors. They didn't really know. So here's how my door's closed a lot. Here's what I'm doing. And then in responsive services, I would explain play therapy and in just the most basic terms. I've always found using Gary's words, play is their language and toys are their words. And I explain a little bit about the neurodevelopment and why that's the case. I've always found that judges, principals, parents with any education level, everybody gets that, right? Um, so yeah, I would educate them about this is what you'll see me doing, and here's why. There were still, I mean, I'm making it sound like it was all rainbows and unicorns. It certainly wasn't. Because I mean, I can tell you a lot of stories. I won't get into all of them, but I'm remembering this kindergarten teacher. This child was a foster child, precious child. We'll call him Donnie, and in trouble a lot because he had been physically abused and he would hurt other children, and he was in my office a lot. And I remember one day I overheard her, shit, no, I was nearby complaining to the principal. I sent him down there because he was in trouble and he came back all happy with the picture he had drawn. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's really terrible, isn't it? That he's happy and going to do okay in class now. So, I mean, I had to do a lot of work with them, but I just kept doing it. And I could provide my principal and my superintendent with research and, they didn't do anything about it. I mean, they didn't stop me. So I just did it. But I do know that when you're young and starting out, it's hard to go in and do that. The fact that I'd been in schools because schools are their own culture gave me some street cred that you don't have if you haven't been there, and it takes a while to earn. So, yeah.
When I think that's such an important part of it, and we've kind of talked about this, I don't know, I feel play therapy is somewhat counterculture because what you're saying to this kindergarten teacher, what's wrong with them being happy? Isn't that the goal? And when they're happy and not in distress and not in overwhelm, then they can learn. But sometimes I think I'm teaching a child development class right now. How are we imposing on adults? And this is a whole other tangent that we don't need to go to, and I might even cut it out. But I'm also wondering, we don't include children and their perspectives on our research. And
No.
what I'm so curious, I don't even, I can't wrap my head around how that might work. But
Mhm.
how do we center children in exploring what it is that we do? Because we center a lot of times, yes, they come into this space but we look at the outcomes based on their caregivers.
Usually, yes, reported by teachers or caregivers. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I think we could stand to bring more qualitative aspects into our quantitative research for that reason, where we get to ask kids their thoughts. I used to do a lot of court ordered work, and I would always ask the kids, what do you want the judge to know? What do you need them to know? And the things they would come up with. I want them to know that I'm doing really well in school. They were not doing really well in school, but they wanted the judge to know that.
Right.
But still, those perspectives and the things that we could draw from those. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that, well, the other thing is, I was thinking about research, Kristi, you cited, I'm not going to remember who it was, in your previous podcast about when children do better, the children around them do better. So you've got a classroom of 30 kindergartners, and this kid that's acting out and misbehaving and causing you so much stress is causing stress to those around him too. So then and everyone's dysregulated. And then he comes in happy and regulated and can function better. Everybody around him is going to function better. So, that's one of those cases where the teacher needed to do some work of her own. I think I found a lot of times the benefit of being a school counselor as opposed to being a school-based clinician is I was part of the culture. I was part of them. And even though you're not an administrator, you're not a teacher, you're never really, but I was part of the school family, right? So they thought nothing of me coming in a classroom to do an observation or being at recess or because I'm just around. And so it did give me an opportunity to work on empathy building with the teachers, which I found myself doing a lot to try to help them better understand where the child was coming from. And I think when you're a school-based clinician, you're so busy with, for that billable hour, going in and getting those kids seen back to back. And you're not getting paid, at least in Arkansas, we won't pay you to work with the teacher. Medicaid wouldn't. You could get paid for a parent session, but not a teacher session. And so there's so much pressure for that billable hour that I think that gets lost a lot. Whereas if you're the school counselor, you have an opportunity to do more of those in services and build those relationships and work on empathy and refer out to counseling as needed because you're there for the teachers too.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so important because I can understand where that teacher would be coming from. It's like
Sure.
you have someone that's dysregulating. I mean, I feel like I do it in my life. Like, will you yell at them, please? Like, will you?
Yeah. We've all been there, right? Yeah.
And so it makes sense, but it's it is, I think your point about how we can't bill if you're in private practice or working in community to work with teachers, but they also need supports too because they're under so much pressure. And so being able as a school counselor to kind of bridge those gaps, I think is really beneficial.
Yes. And as a school-based clinician, or even in my role as a counselor educator, because I'm the school counseling director too, and so I need schools to get my students in. One of the most important things I do is build relationships with my school counselors. And the school, I rely on their relationship with their administrator. Now, I'm happy to meet with administrators too, but it's my relationship with those school counselors that gets me in the door and gets my students in the door. And doing research in schools, which is where the kids are, so it makes sense, but it is so challenging schedule wise, which you guys have already covered. It's also very challenging data wise to be able to collect the data that you need, you know. So, for example, the work I did with Primary Project, CCPT and academics, I had a friend who's a school counselor, and she had been there for years, had a great relationship with her principal and her teachers, and she actually had the Primary Project training. So, in that study or in those studies, we assessed to see who qualified for at risk. Well, she was the one I would go in and bring my school counseling students. We would go in and do lessons and counseling lessons in the classrooms. And Sarah, my friend, would sit with the teachers over snacks that I would bring in at iPads and let them fill out a survey on each one of their students. They got that hour to do that while we were covering the classrooms. My students are getting experience. We're getting the data we need. And took charge of storing that data, the pre and post for that portion of it. That made a huge difference. And honestly, those teachers weren't going to do that for me, even
Yeah.
with snacks and even with an hour off, but they trusted her. And so I find that my relationships with the school counselors get my students in the door for school counseling internships, for play therapy internships, and help me do the research that I have to do. So that's really important, I think.
Will you tell me a little more about Primary Project?
Yeah, so Primary Project it's out of New York, the Children's Institute, and it's been around for well over 50 years. But essentially what they did was they'll come in and do an assessment to see who qualifies for at risk. And those children who qualify, Primary Project, what the project is about is training lay people to provide CCPT services. So most of the time it was grandmothers or retired teachers, or, you find people that are good with kids,
Mhm.
and they provide them training, and then they go in and implement CCPT. Well, my variance on it was I used students who were trained in CCPT that all had intro to play. And so we did the assessment. They went in and provided child center play therapy services, and then we came back and did the assessment again. And in addition, we were able in Arkansas, we're able to access their standardized test scores. So we were able to look at that and see the difference that we made. So, and of course, we had all the challenges you guys have talked about. Space is always a challenge in schools. We actually put up partitions, which is not an ideal playroom, but we made it work. And but the other thing about this school counselor, she's trained in play therapy. She's had all the hours for RPT and just never got it. So she understands play and the importance of play, and she was able to promote that with her administration. So um, yeah.
And the standardized didn't it was so that the kids they kind of filled that gap, right? That they were not considered at risk anymore.
Well, yeah, so yeah, and I'm not looking at the study to give you specifics, but they increased in all academic areas. So yeah, the majority of them no longer qualified for at risk. And it was significant because it's a school that was 97, I believe, 97, 98% Marshallese and Hispanic. And it was a title school. And so and even the kids with English as a second language, I didn't anticipate because it was only, I think it was only 10 weeks. So
Oh,
because of various things with the school schedule, my fear was we're not going to be able to see a difference. But even those kids, their English proficient, their English, yeah, English, math, and reading, I believe, all increased. I'd have to look back at the study to make sure that I have that exactly right. But in just 10 weeks' time, that we saw a difference. So you think if you've got a school counselor who's able to provide play therapy services and given, ASCA says if you're going to need to see a child more than 3 to 5 times, you need to refer them out, which makes sense. But now if 10 sessions can make a difference, 3 to 5 probably could too.
yeah.
There's actually a study, I think it's Jennifer Geddes Hall did an evaluation and found a systematic review and did find that we see changes in 3 to 5, particularly for the school counseling world, that you can
Yes.
make a difference in 3 to 5. Jennifer
Would,
Yeah.
Geddes Hall.
because you already have a relationship, right? So it's even
Yeah.
the study that Kristi and I just did, CPRT had significantly higher effect size than CCPT. But if you think about it, if you already have an attachment, so that if like
Yes.
those first 4 to 6 are establishing the relationship, you already have a relationship. So it makes sense that it could happen, that
It does. Plus, you've got a relationship with the parents, you've got a relationship with the teachers, and even if you're new to the school, they still know you're part of the school. You know that you're part of that. I think that those relationships and attachments make a difference too.
it's really cool. And I think it talks about what PJ was saying too, is this just made a difference in their academics, right? We weren't looking at depression
Yeah.
and anxiety. We don't know. I mean, and I think what he said was, we don't know why, but it did. And isn't there beauty in it?
Yes.
That it did it.
Yeah. I agree. I think we do know why though. I think PJ does too. It's the relationship.
Yeah.
It's the relationship. That's the change agent.
Having someone value you is so, I mean,
Yes. Yeah, and I think we don't give that enough credit. I think both adults who have had good enough childhoods and those who don't, we still take it for granted that this, the magic of the relationship actually, I mean, I know we teach it all the time, but I mean, I will tell you, there's still times in the playroom where I'm, oh my gosh, what I might not be enough this time. This might not be enough. It is. I'm reminded constantly that it is, but that fear still comes up. And I suspect it does for a lot of us if we admit it, that it still does. But but yeah, that's what it's about. It's about that attachment and that relationship.
mhm,
Well, and I think that is so, we talk about it being countercultural to our society, but that is really countercultural in the school system,
Yes, it
where we
is.
get so much focus on academic achievement, test scores,
Yeah.
right? That has seemed to replace um, the relational component that's happening sometimes in
Yeah.
schools. And I watch, I don't know if anyone on here watches, there's a show on, I think it's on the Hallmark Channel. And it's about a teacher at the turn of the century and just the different type, how she teaches from a relational stance and the meaning that has for her students. And even when they get in trouble and other stuff, it has such an impact. It's just a good, gentle reminder to all of us that how
Yeah.
much and how important relationships are in education, in our personal lives, in our professional
Mhm.
lives, in all the ways that we interact with the world.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we get busy and we get stressed and other things that we forget that relationship is going to be, the soft base, that nest that we all go back to when we need support.
Yeah, it's how we're wired. It's really not rocket
Mhm.
science.
No.
But we know from interpersonal neurobiology that when we're stressed, we immediately go to our right hemisphere because we try to make logic out of it. And I think if I'm in the room with a child that's very dysregulated or whatever, then I'm going to go to my logical side and think this isn't enough for this one, right? I mean, it's what we do, but I find that if I can regulate myself and just keep doing what I know how to do, it works out. So, and teachers are under so much pressure. You're right regarding test scores and academics and so much
And
pressure.
sometimes the
And
job is relying on those things. So if you're not performing,
absolutely.
you're not going to have a job, let
Yes.
alone that maybe you have 35 kids in your class, and because you're such a good teacher, they've put the hardest kids in your class. They also forget all the dynamics that go with that.
Right. And none of us are able to function relationally when we're afraid, when we're scared. And that's what that comes down to, I think. So yeah, they're under a great deal of pressure and also just our society as a whole. I'm in Arkansas and corporal punishment is still legal here and still active in most schools. And I mean, I have schools where parents are allowed to come in and whip their kid with the paddle at school. And, we're still very punitive minded. And I know I'm in the Bible Belt, which is part of that spare the rod, spoil the child misunderstanding. But we are still very punitive minded, I feel, as a culture. And also, yeah, just that everything becomes about um, kind of threatening. The kids have to be, there's something that has to be sort of harnessed instead of nurtured in
Mhm.
order to get them to achieve and to do well. So, so yeah, we come in with our child-centered lens and a smile on our face and trying hard to prize every child that we encounter. And we're seen as, whoa, where have they been?
Right.
They've not, they don't know this kid. Or what are they so happy about? They're clearly naive and haven't done this for very long.
Yeah. It's interesting how that works. I've been told that I'm Pollyanna and you're just and it's well, I've seen this work. And I think so often we minimize the relationship. And even now you talk about rocket science, we're looking to science and technology to replace relationship and it can't.
Right. Yeah. AI teachers. Yeah.
And I don't understand and trying to help adults recognize the importance and value of relationship and what's valuable for them can be helpful, but it sometimes is a struggle. And I think what you're saying too, Kristi, is that we have to meet that with our child-centeredness also, right? Our person-centered in relationship is not only for the children, it's for everyone in that space. And so we have to meet them with acceptance and genuineness, even if we're perhaps providing some psychoeducation, but we have to model what it is that we're doing. And that requires a lot of recognizing when we're going into our left brain and into our logic or what's going on for us, just as much as it does when you're in the session of, do I need to set a limit here or not?
Right. Yeah. And it's easier some days than others, right? We're all people and we have things going on in our world. And it's easy for me to get really frustrated with a teacher or a children's, a social worker, or I think we all need somebody to blame sometimes too. But on my good days, I'm able to see their stress and where their behavior is coming from too. And I find when I go to teachers and say, I know you are so stressed. I don't know how you're doing it. You've got 30 kiddos in here and, a handful of them acting in a way that makes them seem more 20 kids more. You've got a big job. It's hard. And acknowledge how they're feeling. And, and I do the same with confidentiality as a sidebar. I know you're so worried about Johnny. I'm worried about him too. I'm keeping an eye on him. And if there's something you can do, I'll let you know because they care. Elementary schools in particular are very territorial and these kids are ours. We want to protect them and they're used to sharing a lot of information. But yeah, I find trying to acknowledge how they're feeling and listening to them and using our person-centered skills works for them. It does for anybody else. I do also use psychoed with them. I mean, CPRT is psychoed, we're teaching new skills. So, and I think teachers and parents, they come to us because they don't know what else to do. And they having something new in their basket to take back and try. And so, if they want suggestions, and I always ask, would you have a suggestion? And if they do, then I'm going to offer them to put something in that basket, one little thing, that one nugget that maybe they could go try. And that tends to make them feel better too, I think. But
When
yeah,
you're
I think
and you're not coming in and saying, this is what you need to do, right?
I want to on a good day. Yes.
Well, I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard sometimes, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. For our listeners, please go ahead and subscribe. You can contact us at info@playtherapyspace.com or Maggie@playtherapyspace.com or Kristi@playtherapyspace.com. Follow us on socials, the Play Therapy Space on Instagram. We're also on YouTube and Facebook. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, hold on. I'm going to